Welcome, everyone, to Beyond Surviving, the safe space for survivors of childhood sexual abuse to receive support, resources, and share their stories. Beyond Surviving is about freedom, healing, connection, and even laughter and fun. Most importantly, it's about letting go of the pain of abuse and finally moving on. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel Grant, and I'm a sexual abuse recovery coach, and I'm also the author of Beyond Surviving, the final stage of recovery from sexual abuse. You can learn more about me and the Beyond Surviving program at rachelgrantcoaching.com. Now, I am so excited to have here with me today my guest, Lisa Smith. We've been chatting via email and getting to know each other, and she's been following along with the year of self-care as well, and we've had some great conversations about that. And I'm really excited to be here with Lisa today to explore this topic of innocence. I think this just comes up so often, the idea of the loss of innocence, my innocence being stolen. These are phrases that I often hear from my clients. And so we're going to hear more about her healing journey and this idea of restoring innocence. At the end of the day, Lisa is a voice of hope and courage. After years of depression and anxiety and hopelessness, certainly as a result of physical and sexual abuse, Lisa chose to prioritize inner healing and wholeness. She is passionate about helping others in their journey of healing from a traumatic loss of innocence. And she's a mother of 4 sons. Oh my goodness, a house full of men. Amazing, raising up some amazing boys, and also a co-pastor of a small revival church in the North Bay area of California. She's also recently published her first book. So y'all go out there and get this book, Restored Innocence, so you can learn more about her journey and her story and get support around this. So Lisa, thank you so much. Welcome. So nice to have you here with me today.
Yeah, thank you. It's like you said, it's been fun to follow along with the other things that you're doing, and to have this opportunity is great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. So just as a starting point, I'd love for you to just share with the audience a little bit of your story, just kind of how you arrived here today, what life was like for you growing up, what your experiences were.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in in a small rural town in Northern California, and pretty conservative upbringing. I was the youngest of 2 kids. I have an older brother, and had a good relationship with my parents in childhood. And in high school, when I started dating, I was 13. I turned 14 early in high school, in my freshman year. And the boyfriend I had was, it's kind of the classic. I've heard this story too many times, where it's the friends don't, my friends didn't like him. He was different than me, and that kind of made it exciting. And he was, I was like his to what was going on in him. And it was like very, very slow in the beginning. He was very kind. And, but quickly I began to withdraw from all my friends and kind of pull away against my family a little bit as well. And he was very respectful in the beginning, and then that changed. And he was just increasingly manipulative. It was difficult for me to recognize that. Looking back, I see all the warning signs. Of course, I saw them all after the fact, but not at the time. And so, I started cutting classes with him and doing different things. And one day the plan was to go out to cut school and go off campus to go out to lunch. And instead of going out to lunch, he said he prepared lunch at his house, and that his mom would be there. He really wanted me to meet his mom. And as it turned out, she wasn't there, and there was no lunch. And my introduction to all things physical up to then, I was very innocent, and I wasn't prepared for what happened. And there was no one there to hear my screams. And so he raped me on his mom's bed. And I went back to high school bleeding and crying and devastated. And Then
Mm.
full of apology and gifts and kindness. And I was full of shame. And so kind of, I honestly don't remember a couple of weeks after that. And then at one point he said he was just being kind, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And then he started showing up at my house, and then at night, and he would throw rocks at my window. The first time I went out, he had a surprise, flowers for me and apology, and the next time, there was no apologies and
Mm.
and so our relationship kind of settled into this routine where at school we were, just a dating couple, and at night I just was on call to be his punching bag and his pleasure. And I didn't tell my parents. I tried to tell a couple of friends, but I'd burned a lot of bridges, and there wasn't a lot of trust, and there was kind of some suspicion of like, why are you saying this now? And I also didn't come right out. I don't even know that I didn't use the word rape until I was in college. I don't know. I don't know how I would have described it at that time. I remember telling a friend, and then one of the teacher's assistants at my school saying negative things about this relationship, and them saying, well, just get out of it. And I said, I can't, I'm so afraid. And,
Yeah.
it's like, that was,
Yeah.
looking back, I think that was what I was capable of. And it was a cry for help. But it wasn't, it wasn't enough. And or it wasn't to the right people, and so eventually I got out of the relationship, mostly by just employing the only strategy I had, which was to have my parents find out that I was sleeping with my boyfriend. And I knew from their values and their beliefs and their view of me, and I just knew that they would, the iron.
Yeah, right. Nip that in the bud.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I kind of let us get caught.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ultimately, that caused a lot of other difficulty in my relationship with my parents, and it got a lot worse before it got better in terms of shame. But it got me out of my relationship with him, and then I just had to deal with his physical threats at school. But things, I wasn't. That ended that was the beginning of the end of our relationship, and that was
right.
The physical and sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your story so openly and so vulnerably. I think about the space in which, young love happens, and we're so hopeful and innocent and wide-eyed and willing and curious. And there's so many interesting, good, fun feelings that are happening at that time in our lives, and how everything, got twisted and turned on its head for you. And the way in which that manipulation of, loving, nurturing, gift giving and apology, and we just don't know. We don't have life experience. We don't have anything to draw upon in those times to help us navigate that. And it breaks my heart, the ways in which you sought solace and comfort and help and support, and didn't receive it, and left to your own devices, right? And so what a brave thing, to kind of this smart young woman who's like, okay, I know I've got to get out of this, but I don't know how, and the only way I can think is to kind of fall on my sword a little bit, is the idea. And then all of the repercussions of that, I can only imagine. Yeah,
and that's a good analogy, to fall on your sword. That is, and yet it was, I look back and I wish I would have done it sooner, that. Even one of the people that you had on recently talking about the prevention of abuse, that was it was good for me to consider. Now I have two teenage sons, and one nearly a teenager, and then my fourth is 8. But to realize how there's things that I have done so differently than my parents, just in terms of talking about sexuality and intimacy and talking about love, what it should look like, being open. My husband and I, in front of our kids, so different than how I was raised in terms of that being,
Yeah.
like that innocence again of feeling like, well, maybe this is how it's supposed to be. If
Right.
if you've not seen your parents, I mean, I think the most I saw was, my parents like give each other a kiss on the cheek when they were coming or going. If there's not a conversation about what intimacy looks like and how it's supposed to build someone up, then I'm like, well, maybe this is what happens to women.
Oh my gosh, it's such an important thing that you're bringing up, which is how intimacy and desire, pleasure, sex is modeled or not modeled, talked
Yeah.
about or not talked about. And so when we're left to our own devices to come up, with the idea, it is so easy to think, well, okay, I guess this is just how, this happens and how relationship unfolds and what's to be expected. Yeah. And then when you're not getting any, immediate reaction of like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. That shouldn't, that shouldn't be the way it is. Then yes, you just kind of start to fall into it. And of course, I'm sure the messages that this person was sending you as well, right? Of like, oh, well, you made me do it. Like, I don't know if it was ever explicit that way, but people, it's very often in the lexicon or just in the energy of what's happening of like, well, I wouldn't do this if you would only do that, that kind of thing. And then we start to think that we're in charge or in control of this other person's, reactions and behaviors. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or just the way things get worked out. I think it's common as I talk with others who have had, the experiences can be so different, but there are so many similarities in terms of how we process them, women and men both, in terms of that tension between wanting out, wanting it to end, trying to make sense of it, but then also feeling like it's your fault, feeling like there's some sense of control. I just, there were plenty of times where I would, it wasn't where I was willing just so that I would not get beaten, so it was kind
of, right. It's like the idea of the lesser of two evils, which
well, yeah, like I'll do that so that I don't,
confronted
the bruises were harder to hide.
I see. Yeah.
The outside stuff was harder to hide from my friends than what was happening inside. So the more willing I was, but that was confusing to me too. Like, well, then I am choosing this. This isn't just his choice. And so all of that, I think in terms of, there's the physical robbing of innocence, but then all of that mind, all of that mental anguish is another kind of loss of innocence as well.
Yeah.
It makes you feel like you're diminished. Your worth is diminished.
Yeah, definitely.
Worthless. And I sometimes I certainly felt worthless, but I mean worthless. Like where I think that is also, that's a different kind of loss of innocence that's slow and gradual, and it can feel hopeless that could ever be restored, in terms of, we hear it all the time, talking with people that have had, whether it's childhood sexual abuse or other kinds of abuse, that feeling of, well, now I, my future will forever be marked by this. And it's the way they feel like they're less worthy of good because of this event.
Yeah.
It's a whole other aspect of innocence.
That's a whole other aspect of it. Yeah, agreed. I'm excited to kind of get into this topic. We're going to take just a short break. And then when we come back, we're going to really dive more deeply into this idea of innocence. What is it? What are we experiencing? What does it even mean to like reclaim it or restore it? So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Are you ready to put your fears of abandonment behind you so you can have happy, healthy relationships? The fear of abandonment is extremely common in those of us who have been abused. When it comes to abandonment, we are very much driven by the fear of the unknown. We don't know if the people we are connecting to may one day withdraw their protection or support. People always leave can be a common inner belief we hold. Boy, have I been there. And I am going to share with you what helped me put an end to this paralyzing fear in my Overcome the Fear of Abandonment Masterclass. By downloading this masterclass, you will gain access to my proven process that will help you feel more confident and secure so you can have relationships that last. I'll also help you identify the toxic behaviors that keep you trapped in a cycle of abandonment and fear, and I'll also help you explore strategies for putting an end to sabotaging all your relationships. Go to rachelgrantcoaching.com/abandonment-class to get your MP3 of this masterclass today. Now, back to our show. Welcome back, everyone. So, Lisa, I really want to dive into this concept and idea of innocence. So let's just define it to start out. Like, what do you really think that this word means, represents?
Yeah, I think that we tend to think of innocence in our culture as just not knowing, like the lack of knowledge or the lack of experience. And to me, it seems like it's usually used in a negative sense, like she's so innocent. It's like a liability. It's like something that you wouldn't. And then we hear about innocence, I think, a lot in our culture with the loss of innocence. And it's always, to me, it feels like at least 90% of the time, it's talked about as something that would never be restored. And so innocence is often linked to youth. And I think it's kind of not in a traumatic way, of course, but I think that innocence is something that's not desired, that it is thought of as something for babies, something for kids. And that I think most people, if asked, about innocence would expect that that's only natural that you would lose innocence time. And yet I think that innocence is not just something that we should relegate to youth. I think innocence is necessary for relationships and for trust. Anytime, setting aside abusive relationships for a moment, just healthy relationships, we hurt each other. Friends hurt one another. Lovers hurt one another. There's, someone making a bad choice or communicating poorly. And then there's the pain that goes with that. And so to regain trust requires some degree of innocence. And I think that, to me, I would define innocence as this feeling of confidence, of being accepted, being loved, feeling like people are out for your good, not out to harm you. And just kind of the self-confidence that comes with that. And I think it in children so easily. You see that children expect that everyone is there to enjoy them and to bless to help them. And
yes.
And that as we grow up, I think it's natural. Of course, it's natural that some innocence is lost. And yet I think that when people get to the point, whether it's from abuse or not, of feeling like all of those are in question. Am I really worth someone's best? Are people watching out for me? I'm the only one that can watch out for me. Those are all indicators of the loss of innocence. And then left untended, I think it starts to inhibit trust. It inhibits being loved, not just being loved, but also loving others. You can become so self-protected from harm that you are also protecting yourself from good. And so then you might not be getting hurt as much, but you're also not able to receive the good, the love that people are giving that is good. And
yes,
so that's a lot. I think innocence is mostly defined by what it's not. Come up with the definition of what it is. That's why I say I think it's this
willingness. What I'm really connecting to and what you're sharing there is willingness.
Yeah.
Innocence has this, it drives this, I'm willing to jump into this creek and see what happens. I'm willing to grab onto this frog and feel it slimy. Who knows what's going to happen? Because there's this not already knowing. I love that. Yeah. Like the idea that innocence is the lack of knowledge, the lack of knowing. And so we have a bit more curiosity and willingness and openness and adventure and playfulness, maybe even.
Yeah.
And that exactly, when we have these life experiences, well, now I know something, and that people can hurt me, people can let me down, people can break my heart or break my trust. then the challenge becomes to how do we continue to remain willing and open. I loved what you
Yeah.
said there. Like we end up missing out because we become so guarded. We
Yeah.
stop believing and expecting the good in others and start
Yeah.
just believing and expecting the
Yeah.
negative or the bad or the harm.
Yeah. Yeah, that sense of doom that comes with
Boom. Yes.
loss of innocence, that you start to expect worse,
Mm.
as opposed to, whether
Mhm.
it's something like you said, like touching something, experiencing a new experience. When a child comes upon something new, their thought is interest and curiosity. But if there's a loss of innocence, then that gets turned to, how could this hurt me? How could this be bad? Who's going to be disappointed?
Mhm. Mhm.
Disappointed,
I think it's really this idea that it's a use it or lose it kind of thing. It's so fascinating, right? Like we only have this one period of life where we
Yeah.
get to experience that or explore that. And I love that you're challenging us to think bigger and broader about that, to really begin to think about, no, actually, I can cultivate a mindset in the present day that is innocent, that is open, that is willing. And what would you say are some of the steps towards that? So we have kind of the concept and the idea.
Right.
Yes, I'd love to do that more than this. I'd like to be open rather than guarded. I'd like
Yeah.
to be willing to create connection and to trust and maybe have more hope in people, right? Rather than
Yeah.
just this despair or this doom that you described. What are some of the steps that somebody might have to take in order to cultivate that kind of mindset?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that the word cultivate is a really good word to use, because I think it's something that grows, like innocence is lost over time. Sometimes, like um in the in a lot of people's situations with sexual abuse, it's there's a initial incident that where there's a traumatic loss of innocence, but then oftentimes it's extended over a period of time as well. And so I think that the word cultivate is good, because I think the regaining or the restoration of innocence is also a journey. It's not something
Mm,
there's not one moment like, okay, now I have it. And so I think the probably the most basic step is really deciding that you believe you're worth it, and that it's attainable. And I think you won't really fight for something unless you're convinced that you can have it and that it's yours and that you're worth it. And so I think those first steps of for whatever kind of trauma people are surviving and
mm,
through, is to look at how, just to be kind to yourself and realize how much it wasn't in your control, and to work through, like, this is something that happened, but it's not who I am. I'm
mm,
just what's happened to me, just like I'm more than the sum of what I've done. I'm also not just the sum of what people have done to me. And to desire.
I have to pause you. That was so well said. I am the sum of what I have done, not just the sum of what others have done to me. Did y'all
Yeah.
write that down? Did y'all catch that? Because that's a word of wisdom from Miss Lisa today.
Yeah.
Like so often we just think about, yes, I am a product of the things that have happened to me, but it's your choices, it's your life,
Yeah.
it's the things that you're doing, the way
Yeah.
that you're showing up.
Yeah.
And that makes such a big difference too. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but I just had
No, that's good.
to.
Well, and we tend to we define ourselves, I think, so much, even by what we've done. And even that, we're not just the sum of what we've done either,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
often we're our own worth critic, and some of what we think of are the negative things we've done.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Like,
It's
oh,
all
we
together.
are so much more than just
Ooh.
what happened.
That's
And
a big call. I mean, I know when I was really in the depths of like the trauma and really was struggling to see myself outside of the context of the messages that I had received as a result of trauma, the ideas and beliefs that I had reinforced over time for myself, just through my own thinking and own behavior, to sit in the space where I began to like open myself to that possibility that maybe I've got this wrong. Right? Like maybe all this stuff that's running around in my head is not really true.
yeah.
And, the idea of worth and deservingness and just beginning to focus on how can I learn that? How can
Yeah.
I take little steps every day to show myself that that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's getting that message out of the secrecy and the darkness of your own.
Okay. Yeah.
Pull it out and say, I feel like I deserve less because this happened to me. You get that thought out of your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Say it out loud. Is that for, to ask yourself, is that something I would say is true of someone else? If someone else were to say
Totally.
it back to them,
Yes.
you're not worth less because this happened to you, like this, or you're not always going to be defined by that. I remember thinking, that classic onion analogy that's often used in counseling. I remember that in counseling and just thinking, I hate this.
Yeah.
I hate that.
I have an endless onion.
That's how it feels. And I remember a good friend, a life coach, saying to me, like, why are you so resistant? Like, why is that so hard for you? Like, you're not hearing it correctly if it's that painful. It's like a life sentence. Like, there's an endless onion, and your whole life you will be finding another layer of this hell.
Yeah.
And it,
not so here and Beyond Surviving, baby.
Right,
that onion is tossed out. No way. Yeah, right. Distinguishing between the part of our journey that is about recovery and the part of our journey that is about living life and facing what life brings. But exactly that. How do we move out of a trauma mindset into a growth mindset and into a place where we can access, parts of ourselves? One of my favorite sayings is, it's never too late to have a happy childhood, right? And like, we can just bring in, whatever it is we want to bring in. If we're breathing, if we're alive, then there is time and there is opportunity to do it differently.
Yeah. And to say, like, to have that message be something that you tell yourself over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Or like the onion analogy, I at one point just had the revelation of, I just need to flip that completely. I'd always thought of it like, I remember asking a counselor, will I be an 80-year-old woman and be finding new layers of having been raped at 13 and 14 years old? And that is the part of me that wants to like throw the onion out. That's that's like, what's with this effing onion? And I remember like I had written it in my journal and I showed her, and she was so offended by that. And I was like, that's what you're saying. I'm going to be 80 years old and I'm still going to be having another layer of this. And then at some point in my own journey, I just realized, no, like it was just kind of this resolute, like putting my foot down. No, I'm going to be an 80-year-old woman, and I will be uncovering a way that I will still, at 80, I will still be finding ways that I am stronger and more capable and more passionate and more wise and more of who I am, because this happened to me and it did not define me in ways that are all negative, like covering ways that this has defined me positively. And I think that's just that. I think that's a step. I think believing that you're worth that and that you can access it, and then going after it in a dogged, perseverant way to keep looking for what gives it overwhelms what overwhelms you. Like, what is it that continue to persevere, to find healing of the different things, to forgive what needs to be forgiven, and to forgive yourself.
Definitely. Yes. Wow.
Like you've been talking about.
I love all that. Yeah. I mean, I'm just so present to you in what you're sharing. I love the word dogged. Like, there's something also, I think, innocent. Like for me, I would put doggedness next to innocence. Like when kids get an idea, like they're on it, they're gonna do it. Like you cannot deter them, right? Like they're going for it, and they don't care what the obstacles or what anybody. That can't happen. I mean, even look at these. This is a wild example. Like my nephew like decided, I can fly. I absolutely can fly. He had no evidence to the contrary, so therefore it is true. And there was no stopping him. There was no reasoning with him. And he was going to take that jump off the roof. And damned if he didn't do it. And, I think that's a funny analogy, but to just think like there are these leaps of faith that we have to take. And, luckily we were down there to catch him, right? And so then that's where support and community comes into play when we're talking about growth and healing, that, we're going to take leaps of faith. And sometimes we're going to land and it's going to stick and we're going to be like, yes, got that, did that, and then other times we might fumble. And because kids do that too, right? In all their innocence, and having that safety net, having that support is another big piece of it. But we can't build that safety net. We can't build that support system when we're looking at others through the lens of trauma. Yeah. Because again, just reiterating what you've been naming, right? We will only see people through the harm that people have caused us, rather than the potential for love and support that they could give us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another key, is just finding people who understand and who are willing. They don't have to have been survivors of sexual abuse themselves. They just have to be willing to hear you and to support that fight in you that says, I'm going to be like your title. I'm going to be more than a survivor. I'm not just going to have lived through this. I want to live as a result of it. I want to live in spite of it. I want to live past it and over it, and be an overcomer that is stronger because of what could have taken me out. Like it didn't take me out, but like, I'm going to use that as a platform. I'm going to build there. And I think finding people, that's such a key, that will support that fight with you and not let you settle.
Yeah, cheers to that. What are some of your favorite ways to cultivate innocence? Like in daily practices, are there any things that you just do that help you really tap into that energy?
Yeah, I think finding things that I enjoy and choosing to prioritize them, and to not just have, so much of our life is focused on what we give other people, but also self prioritize your own care. Like you're doing this year of self-care. I think prioritizing taking care of yourself, but having fun and discovering how you can have fun is so important. And my journey looked so different before and after kids. I think kids help you cultivate innocence because
yeah,
and you play more.
You play way more. Yeah.
Yeah. And as my kids get older, the tendency is to play less, and yet they still will. And so it's like, what new thing? I think trying to always be a learner, like discovering something.
Yeah.
I always wanted a rock tumbler as a kid, and I got one this year for Mother's Day. It's like a little hobby.
Yeah. Girl, those rock tumblers are funny. My nephews got one of those for Christmas, and they were so excited. We're going to take these rocks, we're going to turn them into gems, and then we unpacked it all and put it together. I said, okay, so now you got to let this run for like 3 days. They were like immediately like, what?
Yeah. Totally. It takes forever.
I want immediate gratification. Where are my jewels?
Right.
But I love that.
Takes a long time.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was I was listening to the other day, but it was some documentary. But yeah, the guy was talking about his mom and how like she's 70 years old and learning, how to play the ukulele or something like that. Like that mindset of, ever learning, ever the student, right? Keeps us young, keeps us interested, keeps us, out of getting really stuck in old routines and getting life getting a little bit blah or mediocre, but to continue to kind of find new places of vitality and interest. I love that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, new people, engaging with
people. Yeah.
People that are in all different ages and stages of life than you. So it's just, I think trying to, having to focus on what's new is helpful for cultivating innocence for sure.
I love that. Awesome. Lisa, any final thoughts? Anything that you want to leave our listeners with today?
I think that I just would encourage everyone listening that you consider that as hard as you would fight for someone else to get what you believe is the very best for them, that you're worth that as well. and that you're worth even more than that. Like you are worth your own best fight. And as much as you would give someone else, that you can give that for yourself too. And your own healing journey is worth the best you've got to give it. And don't stop until you have that sense of innocence that says, I have an outlook at life that it's gonna keep getting better. The best is yet to come. Sort of
Love that.
listening hope.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Lisa, thank you for those words of wisdom and encouragement and inspiration. Really powerful. I hope you all will listen and take that to heart. What a call to action to fight for yourself as much as you would fight for someone that you love. Amazing. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Lisa. It was so sweet to have some time to connect with you and talk with you. You're welcome. Yeah, I want to remind you all to hop over to Amazon and pick up Lisa's book, Restored Innocence. There will be a link here in the show notes. You can also connect with her on Facebook, and I'll also include that link. And as always, thank you everybody for tuning in and listening and joining us today. And as always, if you'd like to make a donation in support of the podcast, go to bit.ly/Beyond Surviving Podcast Donation. All contributions are applied towards funding scholarships, the running of donation-based and free programs, and making sure that those reaching out for support get what they need. Visit rachelgrantcoaching.com to learn more about sexual abuse recovery coaching and see the other resources there. And as always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a note, and then come back next time because we have so much more to share. And until then, take good care of you.